Hostage situations usually last a day or two, but this one lasted a whopping 444 days. We're talking about the Iranian hostage issue, in which a group of students broke into the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and took 66 individuals hostage, all because the U.S. granted medical treatment to Iran's former ruler.
Iranian students continue to hold more than 50 hostages at the American Embassy in Tehran this morning.
Hello folks, today we will be talking about the Iranian hostage crisis, how it happened, why it happened, and what were its consequences. But before we delve into all that, we will first have to understand why the heck did Iran hate their ex-ruler so much that not only they ousted his government, but also wanted him dead, no matter what. The overthrow of Shah Pahlavi was a major event in Iranian history. It was a culmination of years of dissent, economic hardship, and political unrest, culminating in a revolution that saw the Shah's government replaced by an Islamic republic. Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran, took power in 1941. He was a powerful ruler who strove to modernize and strengthen Iran's economy. He implemented several reforms, including land reform, industrialization, and the implementation of a more Western-style legal system. He also tried to establish links with the West, which he saw as advantageous to Iran's economic development. The Shah's changes, however, were not uniformly welcomed. Many rural and urban poor people believed that the reforms benefited exclusively the wealthy, while the middle class felt that the reforms did not go far enough. At the same time, the Shah was perceived to be becoming increasingly dictatorial, and many of his detractors were detained and tortured. This fueled growing discontent among his opponents, who sought to capitalize on the Shah's unpopularity. These opponents banded together in the late 1970s under the figure of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, an exiled Shia cleric. Khomeini was an outspoken critic of the Shah and his policies, and he regarded the Iranian Revolution as a chance to establish an Islamic government. Protests began in Iran in 1978, when people took to the streets to express their unhappiness with the Shah's authority. Protests immediately gained momentum and swept across the country. The Shah replied by proclaiming martial law, which enraged the demonstrators even more. The Shah was forced to quit the nation in January 1979, and Khomeini returned to Iran from exile in Paris. Khomeini declared the foundation of an Islamic republic, and a referendum to confirm the new constitution was held in March 1979. The referendum was overwhelmingly approved, and Khomeini was named supreme leader of the new administration. The Shah was deposed formally in April 1979, marking a turning point in Iranian history. The Shah had been a close ally of the U.S. since 1953, when the CIA assisted in the overthrow of a democratically elected government, and the new Islamic government wanted the Shah tried and executed for his crimes against the Iranian people, while the U.S. was reluctant to hand him over. This became a major cause of disagreement between the two countries. At the same time, the United States was also facing increasing criticism from within Iran for its support of the Shah's regime, which many Iranians perceived as oppressive and corrupt. This criticism was further inflamed by U.S. attempts to interfere in the internal affairs of the Iranian government. In particular, President Carter's decision to admit the Shah into the United States for medical treatment on October 1979 angered many Iranians, who saw it as a sign of American interference in their internal affairs. The primary cause of the crisis was the seizure of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran by a group of militant Islamic students on November 4, 1979. Students who supported the Iranian Revolution accused the U.S. of hiding the Shah and using the embassy as a base for meddling in Iranian politics. The students sought the Shah's extradition to Iran for prosecution, as well as the release of a group of Iranians detained in the United States on terrorism accusations. 66 American diplomats and citizens were kidnapped and kept captive in the U.S. Embassy in Tehran by Iranian students and militants for 440 days. These hostages were initially kept together, but after the U.S. failed in their first rescue effort, they were separated around Iran, making rescue extremely difficult. These hostages were similarly kept in pleasant conditions at first, but as time passed, the privileges provided began to dwindle. The United States continued to refuse to meet the students' requests, and the crisis dragged on and on. President Carter's popularity began to dwindle, and when the United States' second attempt failed, his presidency was virtually over. So what happened later? Were the hostages killed? Were they rescued? The Algiers Accords are a set of international agreements between the United States and Iran, signed in Algiers in 1981. These negotiations were conducted in secret, in which the U.S. and Iran agreed to a series of measures to secure the release of the U.S. hostages. These measures included a U.S. commitment to terminate its economic sanctions against Iran, a pledge to release Iranian assets frozen in U.S. banks, and a U.S. promise to refrain from any interference in Iran's internal affairs. In return, Iran agreed to release the U.S. hostages. The accords were signed in Algiers in January 1981, with the Algerian president as a witness. And soon enough, the U.S. hostages were released shortly after the signing of the accords. But that's not it. Remember how we mentioned President Carter was losing favor? Well, someone else was earning a lot of favors. We are discussing President Ronald Reagan. He was sworn in on the same day the Iranian government freed the hostages, giving many the notion that Reagan also played a significant role in delaying the rescue procedure. So much so that Carter lost his presidency and Reagan became the country's rescuer. This theory was researched, but it was never verified. What is genuine and what is not is lost in history's torn pages. The Iran hostage crisis had a major impact on U.S.-Iran relations and the international community. It had lasting effects on the U.S. government, economy, and public opinion. It also served as a major lesson to the international community on the importance of diplomacy and negotiation in resolving international conflicts. The Iranian hostage crisis had numerous consequences, both for the United States and the Middle East. In the United States, the crisis had an immediate and long-term impact on American public opinion. A Gallup poll conducted in the weeks following the taking of the hostages found that 79% of Americans opposed the taking of the hostages, while only 17% supported it. The crisis also had a significant impact on American foreign policy. In particular, it led to a hardening of attitudes towards Iran and the creation of the Carter Doctrine, which declared that the United States would use military force to protect its interests in the Persian Gulf. In the Middle East, the Iranian hostage crisis led to the rise of Ayatollah Khomeini, the most prominent ruler in Iranian history. On one hand, he brought many reforms, but on the other hand, he was also responsible for enforcing strict conservative rules that curbed any notion of personal freedom. Iran that we know now is all because Khomeini envisioned it back when he came to power. The crisis also had a significant impact on public opinion throughout the Middle East. Many saw this as an unprovoked attack. The Iranian administration was widely lambasted by the international media, which had a considerable impact on their international diplomacy. The Iranian hostage crisis altered the course of the two countries' histories by restoring two important conservative figures to power, rulers who would profoundly affect the world narrative in the following years.